welcome back to the Summit View. I'm Tracy Jones, the Director of Marketing at Peak American Investment Advisors. And today we are talking a little bit about some of the most commonly asked questions that we get here, especially at the end of the year when it's time to take a look at finances and what we're doing next year. So, with me today again is Scott Schweitzer. Hi, Scott.
Hey Tracy.
Hey, so we're going to dive into some of the most commonly asked questions, I guess, that we get from our clients. It's holidays, and people, I think, say happy holidays, but kind of have anxious wallets, maybe. So
Mhm.
hopefully, some of these questions can help them out. Um, the first segment we're going to talk about is in income and investments. So the number one question I think we probably get is, do I have enough to retire and stay retired?
Yeah, that's a really common question, and it's gonna be different for everybody out there,
Mhm.
right? You have to look beyond just what your nest egg is. You have to look at your spending patterns in retirement, the things that you want to do,
Mhm.
inflation, market performance. So it's not a yes or no, or hey, this much will work, this much won't work. It's really specific to everybody in their own individual situation.
Right. How do you address when someone comes in and wants to know, how much they can spend during the year?
Yeah. So oftentimes, people refer to the 4 or 5% rule, saying you take your total investable
Hmm.
assets and then you can safely live off of 4% or
Right.
5% withdrawal. I personally think that rule is dead. Again, a lot of the big box firms you go to for scale and ease, they'll go with those measures. But
Mhm.
again, it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish in your life. Are there going to be situations and clients where you need to take more than that 4 or 5%? Yes, it's our job to then look at the portfolio, look at how we can maximize your return, maximize your income for you in order for you to reach those goals and spend what you need to spend in retirement.
Right. I just wanted to interject here really quick because you did mention the big box firms, and I noticed, being in marketing, I do see a lot of the big box firms marketing the 4% rule,
Mm-hmm.
and which is nice about a boutique a
Mm-hmm.
firm. We have the opportunity to actually sit down with you and look at your situation independently. It's not just really based off a risk score and then what cookie cutter you're gonna fit into.
Yeah, and when you look at that 4% rule, it's easy. There's not much thought that goes
Mhm.
in behind there. Where it really becomes more intentional is when those withdrawal amounts become larger than 4 or 5%. And then that's where portfolio management and finding different ways to generate income will really help out.
Right. Okay. So another question we get is what happens to our plan if the market drops 20%?
Well, if you have a good plan, it's already accounted for
Right.
that and nothing will happen.
Right.
Most people, though, don't have a financial plan.
Hmm.
And a good majority of the folks that do have a financial plan, it's outdated. It's sitting on the bookshelf covered in dust.
Hmm.
It's really not an active financial plan. So when we put together financial plans for our clients, we make sure that we take into account not just good market years, but
Hmm.
also years where you may lose 20% in the market. We want to put a plan together that's going to work for you regardless of what the market's doing, because if you think about it, our clients have worked their entire lives. They've saved money, they've made a lot of sacrifices to get to where they are here right
Hmm.
now. They don't want to put their lives on hold because the market's not cooperating,
Right.
right? They have goals and dreams and things they've wanted to accomplish once they've retired. So we want to put a plan together that's going to allow them to do that regardless of what's going on in the outside world.
Right. So I would say if you're working with a financial planner right now, probably one of the questions that you need to take to that financial planner is, does your portfolio account for uh, a 20% drop?
Mhm.
And if it doesn't, then you want to discuss why it doesn't and how to correct that.
Yeah. A lot of advisors too only look at backdated history, right?
Hmm.
And so when they put a plan together for some of their clients, they'll
Hmm.
say, look at how this would have performed over the last 10 years,
Hmm.
or look how this would have performed over the last 20 years. It's important that whoever you work with uses sophisticated financial modeling software to try to accurately project out, hey, this is where we're starting right now. Let's see what this looks like 10, 15, 20, 30 years into the future, factoring in different rates of return, factoring in bear markets, factoring in corrections and recessions, along with all the good times that we see in the market.
Right. And our software can do that. We work
Yeah.
with a software that can do that. Um, how do we turn our savings into a reliable paycheck?
So coordinating income and retirement is a little tricky to tackle on your own.
Mhm.
When you think about it, we have Social Security, some people have pensions, there's other sources of income, whether it's real estate investments or other investments that could be paying
Mhm.
in. Then you also have withdrawals from the portfolio. Sometimes you may look at some guaranteed income sources. So it's important that when you sit down with your advisor, you look at the big picture, all the different income sources you have, and coordinate them not only to provide the income that you need, but also coordinate them in a way that's going to minimize your taxes and be most efficient for you, not just this year, but for the rest of your retirement.
Right. One of the other questions we get is, and I'm sure you probably get this, maybe a lot or maybe not too much. I don't know, but are we taking too much risk or not enough risk?
The first question I always ask people when they ask me that is, what does risk mean to you?
Right. Exactly.
Because risk means something different to
Hmm.
everybody out there. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it. Some folks come in and they're sitting heavily in cash or investments that aren't producing a high rate of return. To me, when I see that, the risk is, are you going to run out of money in your 80s or 90s?
Hmm.
To me, that's a big risk. Another way you can look at risk is someone that may not need to draw off their portfolio to provide income for their lifestyle. They may be invested too aggressively, where they may be able to reach their goals, whether it's income down the road or legacy planning, by taking some of that risk off the table. So, again, it's different for each person that's out there and what they define as risk, along with what we see when we model out their portfolio.
Right. Okay. The next segment that we're going to, of questions that we have, that goes into the taxes and the hidden risks.
Mhm.
Um, how will the taxes change for a retiree in retirement?
So, there's a few ways. One, legislation can always change. The tax rates that we're paying today, they can be the same in the future. They might be higher, they might be lower. One of the biggest hidden risks or tax bombs that we see are folks that come in that have a substantial amount of money invested in an old company 401k or an IRA.
Hmm.
They may not need to take income from that portfolio, and therefore they're letting it just grow year after year after year. Where it is currently, a lot of folks fall into that category of at 73, they're going to need to start taking distributions regardless of if they need that money or not. Now, what happens then is they could be faced with one, two, 300,000, sometimes more dollars worth of income that's going to be taxable to them because they're required to take that money out.
Hmm.
So it's important, especially in those situations, we try to do as much proactive planning before we get to that point to help mitigate those required minimum distributions down the road that could come through Roth conversions if it's appropriate,
Hmm.
sometimes through charitable gifting to help reduce that tax burden and help make it a little bit more manageable down the road.
Hmm.
Taxes are something we can't get away from, but there's ways that we can work within the system to try to make sure you're not paying more taxes than what you actually need to.
Right. Yeah. And we do educational workshops at Peak. And so there'll be a link in the bio for what's coming up. And you might want to attend one of our workshops where we go into the tax conversation a little bit more in depth. Okay. So next is a pretty common question. We actually have a whole workshop revolved around Social Security. But when should we take Social Security?
Again, I feel like it's a very common answer, but it's going to depend on your
Yeah.
situation. Things that we're going to look at are other sources of income that you have in retirement.
Mhm.
We're going to look at you and if you're married, your spouse's benefit amount, work history, life expectancy. These are all things that need to be looked at on a one-on-one level
Mhm.
to determine when is the best time to file. For some folks, it may be filing at 62.
Mhm.
In other situations, it may be waiting until full retirement age. In some situations, it might be waiting until 70 years old. Again, it's important to look at all the sources of income that you could potentially have in retirement,
Mhm.
put together a coordinated strategy where you're not just looking at social security in a silo or pensions in a silo and
Right,
portfolio withdrawals in a silo. You have to look at it all together to be able to put forth the best plan to go forward.
right. Okay, let's see. Um, Another question is about the required minimum distributions
Hmm.
and how you build a plan around that.
And so it touched on that a little bit earlier. To me, they're one of the biggest hidden tax threats in
Mhm,
retirement. Again, just to touch on before, even if you don't need to take income off of your IRA or your old 401k at 73, you're going to be required to take money out. So, some ways that we could plan around that, again, with the financial software that we use, we can model out and estimate what those potential RMDs may be 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road,
mhm,
and then put together a strategy now to help try to reduce those RMDs down the road, perhaps keep you in a lower tax bracket instead of bumping you up into a higher one. Charitable gifting, Roth conversions, these are all strategies we can use. Doesn't mean we use them with every single client. It depends on their situation. But in a situation where you have a client with a very large IRA with no need to take income from that, and say legacy may be their biggest goal, leaving as much money behind to their loved ones as possible, a
mhm.
Roth conversion might be appropriate there. So
Right,
we're going to look at all different options.
right. And, we kind of use the philosophy around our office that, we're helping people climb up the mountain
Mhm.
to the peak
That's where your view is.
where your view is, right?
Yeah.
So your retirement is, and what is your view in retirement? And that is what all these questions are leading up to is
Mm,
how we create the best view, for you.
mm,
And that brings me to healthcare and long-term care, which are part of a healthy planning.
yeah. And long term care is one of the biggest expenses that
Hmm.
folks that are in retirement face, along with medical bills,
Right.
just in that same category.
Hmm.
What we do is we're going to model out what does this look like if you or your spouse or potentially both of you need some long-term care down the road.
Hmm.
Some folks are in the situation where they could self-fund just fine. Other folks are in a situation where they will need some type of an assistance. Maybe it's through a hybrid product where you can get some long-term care coverage to help offset those costs.
Hmm.
I believe the average stay in long-term care is roughly around 3 years, could be upwards of $10,000 a month.
Hmm.
And I think the big part about planning for this, it's something no one wants to talk about,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, most people don't want to be a burden on their spouse or a burden on their children. So having these more difficult conversations now to
Hmm.
make sure you have the proper coverage in place down the road is going to save you and your family a lot of grief.
Right. And in our last episode, we talked about that,
Mhm.
how important it is to have those conversations so that you're not left like with what do I do,
Yeah,
situation,
it's
especially in health and long-term care.
it's tough when you talk about end of life planning,
Yeah,
estate planning, legacy planning, things like that, because no one wants to talk about the day that they may not be here anymore.
right.
But in my experience, the families that do have those conversations
Mhm,
early on and do plan creates a much better transition than those that are trying to figure it out
mhm.
essentially when the time's too late.
Right, and when you're trying to grieve too
Mm,
through the process, just
yeah.
makes it. And I think for me, I have mine all set out, and my family knows the plan.
Mhm.
And I know for me, that's a lot off me.
Yeah.
If something happens to me, I don't have to worry. Everything's already set, and they know what to do.
Yeah.
So,
A big piece of retirement, and I would say the reason people should do planning is to have that clarity and that peace of
mhm,
mind. When you go into retirement, think about this. You may have worked 40 years to get to where you are.
mhm,
You want to be able to enjoy your last 20 or 30 years. You don't want to be worrying about the what ifs or did we take care of this the correct way? Or
mhm,
am I going to have enough money? Or am I leaving money behind to my spouse or my kids in the most efficient way?
mhm.
It's better to have all those answers answered up front so that way you can go through retirement just enjoying your life.
Exactly. That sounds good. Um, what happens to my spouse if something happens to me?
So we see this a lot,
Mhm.
where one spouse may be the complete decision maker as far as all the finances go, and if they pass away, it essentially leaves that other spouse just lost.
Mhm.
One of the big things that we encourage all of our clients to do, if they are that decision maker, that's fine, but we want to have both spouses included in the conversation so everybody knows exactly where we are, exactly where we're trying to go, and how we're doing it. On top of that, it creates a known person for that spouse to reach out to in the event something unfortunate happens.
Mhm.
They don't have to start a relationship over from the beginning. To
Right.
your point earlier, while you're grieving and a
Mhm.
million other things on your mind, the last thing you want to be doing is shopping around for a financial advisor. So you want to have
Exactly.
a good established relationship with someone that you could trust, someone that knows your story and is helping you live out your dreams.
Right, exactly. I shared in the last episode, I shared a little bit about my dad, and that's exactly the situation when my dad passed away. My mom and dad came from a time when even on their checks, it
Mm,
it had Mister and Miss,
mm,
on the checks. That's how old fashioned it
mm.
was, kind of in that way. But when my dad died, my mom had no idea. None
Yeah.
of us did, and we had to. It was work to my dad had left our family very well off, and I'm sure he didn't tell anybody how much he had for a reason
Mhm.
because he didn't want anybody spending it. But it was frustrating at the same time because we had to go dig and try to find stuff, and it was a lot. So it's much easier on the spouse if the one that's left to
Mhm.
have this, you know, planned out.
It reminds me of one of the first clients I ever took on. This about 20 years ago. I met her about 3 weeks after her husband had passed, and she had told me, "Hey, I know he has money. I know we have money. The money was just always in the checking account for me to pay the bills with. Now I don't know where that money is. I don't know how to get to it. I don't know how I'm going to pay
Hmm.
my bills." And her and I spent the better part of 2 months calling banks that were national banks, going around to some of the local banks and credit unions, trying to find out exactly where he had accounts
Hmm.
and how they were set up. Eventually, we located them all, and she had about $600,000
Hmm.
to help her live for the rest of her life. But going into that, she didn't know where to start. She was worried she wasn't going to be able to pay her electric bill and put food on the table. So it took a little bit of work. Whereas having a plan in place before that, having both spouses involved in the conversation
Yeah,
could have alleviated a lot of stress for her.
right, exactly. Okay, so the next segment we're going to talk about is family, estate, and legacy.
Mhm.
Um, everybody needs to make sure that their accounts are titled correctly and the beneficiaries are up to date. And so, why is that important?
Yeah, there's a lot of times where you'll see folks perhaps on their second marriage
Hmm.
and they haven't updated their beneficiary, and the ex-spouse is still listed as the primary beneficiary. And if that's the way it's listed, there's going to be a little bit of trouble going about getting the assets distributed in perhaps the correct way now,
Hmm.
because the way that they were listed previously. As far as making sure everything is coordinated, again, when you look at an estate plan, if folks have a living trust, which in some cases is a great asset to have, if that trust is not properly funded the correct way, it essentially doesn't do anything. It's a very expensive stack of papers.
Right.
So when we look at our clients' accounts, we make sure that beneficiaries are all aligned the way that the client wishes. We also make sure that trust accounts are properly funded with the correct
Hmm.
assets to ensure a smooth transition upon passing. And in a lot of states too, you'd be avoiding probate,
Right.
which can be very helpful for families as well.
Yeah. And that gets very expensive.
Yeah, expensive and time consuming.
Yes. Um, and this next question kind of goes along with that, just making sure that all the documents are in place, and besides, even health directives and
Mm.
powers of attorney and all of that stuff.
Was gonna say, powers of attorney are a big one in our industry, especially if folks have accounts that are, or the only accounts they have are IRAs,
Hmm.
stands for individual retirement account. So if a husband and wife are clients and only one of them has an account and it's an individual retirement account, and that person becomes incapacitated where they can no longer effectively
Mhm.
communicate with our advisors, perhaps there's a health issue or memory issue, legally we are only allowed to communicate to that
Yeah.
person unless we have a power of attorney on file. um, it's one of those things I tell people it's better not to wait until it's too late to get those power of attorneys while everyone is of sound mind. Get those to your advisor, get those to your financial institution.
Right.
That way, in case the unfortunate event where something
Mhm.
happens, we're able to effectively communicate to your spouse.
Right. And so when someone comes in to meet with us, this is part of the service is covering all of this. We even can help with the estate. We work with attorneys that
Mhm.
can help us. We can't give legal advice, but we do work with attorneys that.
Yeah, we work with an attorney team that can not only review a current estate plan
Mhm.
that clients may have, check for areas that need to be updated
Right.
due to outdated legislation, but we also have the ability to have that team draft legal documents here for our clients and provide them with the correct documentation that they will need in order to ensure smooth transitions down the road.
Right. And we do also have CPAs available. So, really, if you can find a place that has, um, a one stop, like you
Mhm.
can come to your financial advisor and you can work with your CPA and your estate attorney and have everybody on the same page rather than having go into this office for this and that office for that. And not everybody's on the same page.
That's so important. Uh, earlier, I spoke about looking at pieces of your financial plan in silos.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing when you're trying to coordinate your estate plan, your tax strategy, your investments. It's great if you're working with a CPA and you have a great estate planning attorney and a great financial advisor. The likelihood of them all communicating regularly
Hmm.
to make sure your plan is going exactly how it should be is pretty small.
Right.
If you can find a place where essentially all that is brought in house, like you said, the one stop shop,
Hmm.
where they can coordinate, hey, is your estate plan lined up with your tax strategy?
Hmm.
Are both of those lined up with your investment strategy? And if any one of them deviates from course, it's quick to adjust.
Right.
That's the ultimate goal.
Right, exactly. Let's see. Next would be how much should we plan to leave our children, and how much are we allowed to enjoy now?
It's a great question. It comes down to everyone's individual preference.
Hmm.
I've heard everything from I want to bounce my last check to I
Right.
want to leave each kid, millions of
We've heard
dollars.
both the extremes, haven't we?
Yeah, and so it really depends on the person and what they're trying to do, and
Hmm.
I would say if it was, "Hey, do we live the life that we want, or do we leave money behind to the children?" Uh, I would always say, "Take care of yourself. Enjoy yourself, enjoy your time now, because
Hmm.
at some point, you're not gonna be able to do all the things that you've wanted to do in retirement." The travel, the activities,
Right.
as we get older, those things tend to slow down.
Right.
So enjoy those, let's plan for those. If there's money left over for the children or charities, that's great. Um, there's other folks though that come in and say, "Hey, I don't care making some sacrifices. Maybe I won't take a trip every year. I want to make sure that each of our children or each of our beneficiaries have a certain dollar amount when
Hmm.
we pass, and we can plan around that as well."
Right. And so that brings us to a very good question. Whenever that does come up, um, are the children actually even ready to receive money?
Yes and no.
Hmm.
Again, it's going to be different situations. There's some folks who, when they're leaving money behind to their beneficiaries, set up special trusts
Hmm.
that only pay out a certain amount every year or every other year or a time frame determined by them because they may not trust the person to make financially responsible decisions. There's other folks that say, "Hey, when I'm gone, this entire portfolio or this entire
Hmm.
investment account is going to my beneficiary and they'll know what to do with it." That's why it's important to have those conversations with your family, as we talked about for legacy
Hmm.
planning, estate planning, things like that, but also for an understanding of financial literacy to understand, hey, if I do leave behind a sizable inheritance to one of my children or to a beneficiary, are they going to be responsible enough to handle a
Hmm.
dollar amount like that at once, or should we break it up? It's where having those conversations early on really
Hmm.
come into play.
Yeah. And I would say that's where it's nice to work with more of a boutique firm because we really become family with our
Mhm,
clients. So we know the children or the yeah, I say children, they could be adult children,
mhm,
even, they might even come in for a meeting too. So that's one of the nice things about that versus, going to a big box where they just really are running so much business. They don't have enough time to
mhm,
spend to get to know the family and to get to know, specific situations about children maybe that would not be good with money
mhm.
versus, maybe I've got one that's good with money and one that's not good with money. So what's the best thing to do? So,
Yeah, it's not uncommon if you walk up and down the halls here, you see clients in the office meeting with their advisor, and they have their children with
hmm,
them. It's good for just having that baseline relationship, but then also for education for the folks that will be inheriting this money.
right.
This is the strategy. This is how we've been managing the money. These are the goals in mind. So that way, eventually, when that transition does happen, you're not starting from scratch,
Hmm,
trying to build a relationship, trying to formulate what your financial plan would be.
right,
It's already set up and it's a smooth transition.
right. Okay. And here is the last question is who is our quarterback if something happens?
So one of the most valuable things in working with an advisor team
Hmm,
is having essentially that quarterback,
right.
that advisor to help coordinate all the different aspects of your estate plan, all the different aspects of your tax strategy, your investments, to understand you, your goals, and to be the quarterback,
Hmm,
making sure that everything is being operated the way it should be. So, working with a good advisor that understands you, your situation, your family, your
hmm,
goals is of utmost importance.
right. A football team doesn't get very far unless it has
A good
a good
quarterback.
quarterback.
Yep.
So those are a few of the most frequently asked questions around our office. I will have a link in the bio for these so that you can have these questions if you would like to take these questions to your financial advisor. Um, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thanks.